You know, usually when we think about healing a physical injury, we just picture it as this incredibly frustrating waiting game.
Oh, absolutely. It's just endless waiting.
Right. Like you tear a muscle or you severely sprain a joint or maybe you just push a little too hard at the gym and suddenly you're stuck on the couch for weeks.
Yeah, and you're icing it, you're elevating it, but mostly you just have to sit around hoping your body eventually, gets around to fixing the structural damage.
Exactly. Because the body operates on its own ancient evolutionary timeline, right? For most of human history, we've just been passengers on that very slow ride to recovery.
We really have. We're completely at the mercy of how fast our local cells decide to work.
But what if you could bypass that waiting room entirely? What if there was a compound that acted like a microscopic cellular construction foreman?
A foreman. I like that analogy.
Yeah, picture a guy in a hard hat stepping right onto the injury site, blowing a whistle, and directly commanding your body's own specialized cells to rapidly repair muscle, stitch up tendons, and even regenerate heart tissue.
Which sounds like science fiction, honestly.
It really does, but that is the wild promise we are looking at today. Welcome to today's deep dive, where we are exploring a highly intriguing and highly controversial peptide called TB-500.
It's a fascinating topic.
Our mission today for you, the listener, is to take a detailed breakdown by Nikki Chase from Era Organics and use it as our map. We're going to sift through the dense biology, separate the biohacking hype from the actual mechanics, and figure out if this compound really is the ultimate biological shortcut.
And we really need to dig into it because TB-500 sits right at the bleeding edge of regenerative biology and, well, the underground athletic scene.
Right. It's everywhere in those circles.
It is. Because when you look at the raw mechanics of how this peptide operates, it fundamentally changes how we think about tissue repair. It's moving away from passive healing to active, directed regeneration.
Okay, so let's unpack the cellular foreman idea. Before we look at the massive list of alleged benefits, we really have to understand what this compound is at a microscopic level.
Because it doesn't just come out of nowhere, right?
Exactly. The Era Organics article notes that TB-500 is a laboratory-synthesized peptide, but it's actually based on something our bodies already make naturally to heal wounds, right? A protein called thymosin beta-4.
Yeah, thymosin beta-4 is what we call an endogenous peptide, meaning it originates inside your body naturally.
Okay, where do we find it?
It's found in high concentrations in mammalian tissues, but particularly inside your blood platelets. So whenever you experience trauma, your platelets rush to the scene and release this protein to kickstart the healing cascade.
Okay, wait, so if we already have this natural healing protein rushing to our injuries, why do we need to synthesize TB-500 in a lab? Like, why not just let our natural thymosin beta-4 do the job?
That's a great question. It's because native thymosin beta-4 is a massive full-length peptide. It's made up of 43 amino acids.
Which is pretty big for a peptide, right?
Huge.
Yeah.
And in its natural form, the body metabolizes it and clears it out of the system very rapidly. Evolution designed it to be a temporary signal.
Ah, I see. So it shows up, triggers the local response, and then just quickly vanishes before it can overstay its welcome.
Exactly. Which is great for standard maintenance, but maybe not enough if you are trying to bounce back from, say, a torn Achilles in record time.
Right. Athletes don't want the natural timeline. They want the fast track.
Precisely. And that's the issue scientists wanted to solve. They took that massive natural protein and mapped it out to find the exact microscopic sequence responsible for the actual healing.
So they snipped away all the unnecessary bulk.
They did.
Mm-hmm.
They isolated just the active healing domain. And by taking only that crucial active fragment and attaching acetate for metabolic support, they created TB-500.
Wow. So it's a leaner, far more durable version built for better distribution.
Yeah, and long-lasting stability in the human body.
So going back to my analogy, they basically fired the massive construction company and just kept the hyper-efficient foreman, letting him stay on the job site much longer.
That is exactly what they did, yeah.
And when this foreman gets to work, the source breakdown focuses heavily on his primary mechanism, which is interacting with a protein called actin. What is that?
So actin is arguably one of the most vital proteins for cellular structure and movement. In your body, you have something called G-actin, or globular actin.
Okay, globular. What does that look like?
You can picture these as individual loose bricks just sort of floating around inside the cell. TB-500 actively binds to these loose G-actin monomers and forces them to convert into F-actin, which is filamentous actin.
Oh, I get it. So it takes the individual loose bricks and instantly snaps them together into long structural beams.
Right, it creates this biological scaffolding, and that scaffolding is the secret to accelerated healing.
Why is the scaffolding so important, though?
Because of progenitor cells. Those are the raw worker cells that will actually rebuild your torn muscle or ligament. But when they need to travel across a wound bed to fix the damage, they can't just float over.
They need a road.
Exactly. They need physical roads to migrate across. Without that structural actin scaffolding, the repair cells are just stuck. TB-500 forces the creation of those cellular roads, ensuring the worker cells can migrate efficiently exactly where they are needed.
That is wild. But the construction foreman isn't just building roads for the workers. According to the Era Organics breakdown, he's also clearing out the old wreckage.
Yeah, that's a crucial part of the process.
Because it says TB-500 upregulates enzymes called matrix metalloproteinases, which is a mouthful.
It is a mouthful, yeah.
But if I understand it right, these enzymes basically act like the biological demolition crew.
That is a perfect way to look at it, because before you can lay down a pristine new foundation, you have to clear out the damaged necrotic tissue from the injury.
Right, you can't build a new house on top of a collapsed one.
Exactly. So these enzymes remodel the extracellular matrix. They break down the microscopic rubble so the new tissue has a clean environment to grow into, restoring the structural integrity.
Okay, so we have the roads built, the workers are migrating, the rubble is cleared. And then, and this is crazy, TB-500 handles the logistics by stimulating angiogenesis.
Yes, the blood vessels.
It increases the production of vascular endothelial growth factor, or VEGF. So in plain English, it is literally forcing the body to grow brand new capillary networks.
Brand new blood vessels out of the existing ones, yeah. Laying down fresh plumbing, keeping with your metaphor.
That's incredible. Why is that fresh plumbing so critical?
By forming these new tubular blood vessels and stabilizing their basement membranes, TB-500 guarantees that fresh oxygen and nutrients are delivered straight into the dead center of the healing wound.
Which stops further tissue death.
Exactly. It prevents further cell death in areas that were starved of oxygen because of the initial trauma.
Well, if this foreman is building cellular roads, calling in the demolition crew, and laying down fresh blood supply lines, there's no logical reason his crew is limited to just skeletal muscle, right?
No, not at all. The mechanisms are universal.
That's where the practical applications get really wild for you listening. We started off talking about a typical gym injury, maybe a pulled hamstring.
Right, a standard muscle strain.
And the text notes that for skeletal muscles, TB-500 activates myogenic precursor cells, repairing the muscle fibers and significantly reducing lactic acid buildup so athletes maintain their flexibility.
Which is great on its own.
It is, but then it looks at tissues with notoriously terrible natural blood flow, like tendons and ligaments.
Tendons and ligaments are the absolute bane of sports medicine. Because they have such poor vascularity, they heal incredibly slowly.
And usually poorly, right?
Yeah, when they do heal, the body often just slaps down this haphazard scar tissue.
But TB-500 supposedly organizes collagen fibers into parallel alignments. Why does that specific alignment matter so much for a tendon?
Think of a thick rope. If the individual threads inside that rope are tangled and crisscrossing in every random direction, the rope is weak.
It'll just snap under pressure.
Exactly. That is haphazard scar tissue. But if every single thread is laid perfectly parallel, running in the exact same direction, the rope can handle massive tension.
Oh, wow. So TB-500 ensures those collagen fibers heal in perfect parallel alignment.
It does, meaning the injured tendon regains its optimal tensile strengths. It also reduces adhesions, which basically stops the tendon from getting glued to its surrounding sheath during recovery.
That alone would make it the holy grail for sports recovery. But the breakdown doesn't stop at physical therapy. Suddenly, we are talking about surviving a heart attack.
Yeah, the cardiovascular benefits are stunning.
The peptide apparently promotes the survival of cardiomyocytes, the actual heart muscle cells, after cardiac trauma. It protects against reperfusion injury. What is reperfusion injury?
Reperfusion injury is this massive secondary threat during a heart attack.
Yeah.
When blood supply is cut off to the heart, the tissue starts dying, right?
Right.
But when the blockage is cleared and oxygen-rich blood suddenly comes rushing back into that starved tissue, the shock actually causes massive oxidative stress and further cellular damage.
Oh, so the return of the blood actually hurts it more initially.
Yes. But TB-500 shields the heart cells from that secondary shock and has even been shown to improve the heart's ejection fraction, which is how effectively it pumps blood.
And it crosses the blood-brain barrier, too, protecting neurons from oxidative stress, promoting the growth of axons and dendrites, and actually stimulating the production of myelin, the protective sheath around nerves.
It really does seem to do it all.
I have to push back here, though. This sounds dangerously close to snake oil.
I know, it sounds too good to be true.
Right, like, is this peptide some magical biological Swiss Army knife that miraculously knows how to do cardiovascular surgery, neurological repair, and physical therapy? Or is it just doing one specific trick incredibly well?
It is absolutely doing one central trick.
Okay.
But it's a trick that impacts every system in the body. TB-500 is not a Swiss Army knife with 50 distinct tools.
Okay, then what is it?
It's a master key that unlocks one universal biological process: the total reduction of inflammation and the stabilization of the cellular environment.
Let's break that down, because growing a new myelin sheath in the brain and fixing a torn rotator cuff seem worlds apart.
Anatomically, they are distinct, sure, but cellular trauma looks remarkably similar at the microscopic level, whether it happens in the brain or the shoulder.
How so?
Well, whenever tissue is damaged, the body hits a biological panic button known as the NF-κB protein complex.
The panic button. I like that.
Yeah, and this complex triggers the massive inflammatory response, flooding the area with pro-inflammatory cytokines. It's a scorched earth defense mechanism. And TB-500 actively suppresses that NF-κB panic button.
So it walks onto the job site, sees the body sounding the alarm and flooding the area, and just hits the mute button.
It shuts off the alarm entirely. By downregulating those inflammatory signals, it lowers the swelling that physically presses on nerves and causes chronic pain.
Which explains why people feel better so fast.
Right. It also drastically lowers the concentration of reactive oxygen species, or ROS, which are volatile molecules that exacerbate tissue damage.
And the article mentions something about macrophages, too.
Yes. Most impressively, it interacts with macrophages, a type of white blood cell. It encourages them to transition from a pro-inflammatory state to an anti-inflammatory state.
So it flips the switch on the immune system's frontline soldiers, turning them from attack and destroy mode into clean and rebuild mode.
Exactly. So it doesn't matter if the trauma is a torn ligament struggling to heal, cardiac tissue dying from lack of oxygen, or neural tissue suffering from stress.
Because TB-500 doesn't actually know how to build a heart cell.
No, it doesn't. What it does is control the inflammation, clear the necrotic rubble, lay down new blood vessels for nutrient delivery, and build the actin roads.
It simply engineers the absolute perfect, pristine, inflammation-free environment so your body's own specialized cells can finally do their jobs without interference.
You nailed it. It's the ultimate facilitator. It even lowers cortisol levels, clearing away the stress hormones that notoriously stall muscle recovery.
Creating that perfect panic-free environment sounds like an absolute miracle. So how does this actually get into the system?
Well, here's the catch.
Right, because with all these full-body benefits, you might assume you just order a bottle of pills online and take one with your morning coffee.
I wish it were that easy.
But the reality of administering TB-500 is, well, it's not exactly a gummy vitamin.
No, the administration protocol is intensely clinical, and it requires a high tolerance for needles.
Exactly. The breakdown details that users are buying this as a lyophilized powder, which is essentially freeze-dried in a vial.
Right, it looks like a little puck of powder.
And then they have to play amateur chemist by mixing it themselves with bacteriostatic water and injecting it subcutaneously into their fat or intramuscularly right into the muscle at home.
Yes, it's very hands-on.
Why does it require an injection? If it's so durable, why can't we just swallow it?
Because peptides are proteins, and your digestive system is incredibly efficient at breaking proteins down into basic amino acids before they ever reach your bloodstream.
So stomach acid would just destroy it.
Completely. Taking TB-500 orally would destroy the specific fragment before it could act. It must be injected to ensure it enters the circulatory system intact.
And once it is in the bloodstream, its systemic nature takes over, right?
Yes. It circulates throughout the body to hunt down inflammation, meaning it can heal damage far away from the actual injection site.
So if you have a torn Achilles tendon, you don't necessarily have to inject this directly into your heel?
No, that would be incredibly painful and unnecessary.
You just drop the foreman into the bloodstream, and he patrols the body looking for the biological panic signals?
Correct. The systemic absorption allows it to find the upregulated NF-κB signals wherever they are.
As for the dosage protocol, the source says it requires serious commitment.
It does. The standard approach involves two distinct phases. First, there is a loading phase. generally 2 to 5 milligrams per week for 4 to 6 weeks.
To build it up in the system.
Exactly. This builds up the concentration of the peptide in the bloodstream to initiate that heavy tissue repair.
And because the half-life requires stable levels, hitting those weekly numbers usually means multiple injections every single week, right?
Yeah, often 2 or 3 times a week.
Then, after a month and a half of that, you enter a maintenance phase.
Right. You step the dose down to about 2 milligrams every 2 weeks to support the ongoing healing process. A full standard cycle lasts anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks.
What does that timeline look like for the person actually experiencing the pain? If you are injecting yourself multiple times a week, when do you realize it's working?
Well, the molecular actions, the binding to actin, the signaling of the demolition enzymes, those begin within minutes of the injection entering the bloodstream.
But you don't feel that immediately.
No, physical release scales with the severity of the trauma. Users routinely report a noticeable drop in acute inflammation and pain within the first 48 to 72 hours.
That's still really fast.
It is. For an acute sports injury, like a minor muscle strain, the first real signs of structural healing show up within just 7 days.
7 days for a muscle strain is incredibly fast.
It is a massive acceleration of the standard evolutionary timeline. However, for severe structural issues, think full ligament tears, severe tendinopathy, or chronic joint degradation, it requires patience.
It's not magic.
Right. It can take up to 6 weeks just to get reliable chronic pain relief, and the full structural recovery of a severe ligament tear will take the entire 3-month cycle of consistent use.
And the breakdown mentions that in the biohacking space, people rarely use TB-500 in isolation. They stack it with other peptides to create a synergistic recovery cocktail.
Very common practice, yeah.
The most famous one mentioned is BPC-157. How does that differ? Like, if you already have the ultimate cellular form, why bring in another peptide?
Because they attack the healing process through entirely different pathways. While TB-500 focuses on cell migration via actin and building new blood vessels, BPC-157 modulates growth factor.
Oh, so they do different jobs on the same site.
Exactly. And BPC-157 specifically protects the endothelium, the lining of your blood vessels, against oxidative stress. Stacking them covers multiple angles of the inflammatory and repair response simultaneously.
Well, that makes sense.
Interestingly, BPC-157 is stable enough in gastric acid that it can actually be taken orally.
Oh, wow. Which really highlights how uniquely strict TB-500's injection requirement is.
Yeah, it's a stark contrast.
The Era Organics article also mentions stacking it with compounds like ipamorelin or CJC-1295, which explicitly increase the body's natural production of growth hormone, pouring even more fuel on the fire for new protein synthesis.
It's a very aggressive recovery protocol.
But all of this leads us to the massive catch. The protocol mandates a hard 4 to 8 week break after that 12-week cycle. You absolutely have to stop.
You do. It's not optional.
Why? If we have this compound that rapidly regenerates tissue, lowers pain, and builds new blood vessels, why isn't my doctor prescribing this for my bad knee? What happens if you don't stop?
This brings us to the dark side of TB-500, and it hinges on a terrifying biological irony. The mandatory breaks aren't just suggestions. They are vital because continuous, unregulated stimulation of the body's repair mechanisms is phenomenally dangerous.
At first glance, the side effects listed just sound like standard medication warnings. Fatigue, occasional headaches, dizziness, nausea, and the obvious injection site reactions like localized redness or swelling.
Those are just the acute surface-level reactions.
But the severe risks are where this jumps from a biohacking experiment to a genuine health crisis. The text highlights a major risk of unregulated tissue growth.
Think back to the mechanisms that make TB-500 a miracle for healing. Relentless angiogenesis, the constant creation of new blood vessels, and rapid cellular proliferation.
Right. The foreman building the roads and plumbing.
Exactly. Those are fantastic features when you are trying to bridge a physical gap in a torn tendon. But if you remove the body's natural limits by artificially pumping your system full of this compound for too long, that constant stimulation can feed abnormal, dangerous tissue growth.
You are building roads and plumbing that lead to nowhere, or worse, to the wrong things entirely.
Yes. We are talking about the potential development of fibrous, restrictive scar tissue that actually impairs movement. Or, far more concerningly, tumors.
Tumors? Just from a healing peptide.
Well, tumors are essentially rogue cellular growths. And to grow and thrive, they desperately rely on angiogenesis. They need a blood supply.
Oh my God, so it feeds them.
If you have an undetected microtumor, and you flood your body with a peptide that specifically commands the aggressive growth of new blood vessels, you risk feeding and accelerating unwanted, dangerous cellular masses.
The very mechanism that heals your torn muscle could literally feed a tumor if you don't force a hard break and let your biological baseline reset.
That is an enormous physiological gamble.
It really is.
And it is compounded by the fact that we have a complete lack of long-term clinical safety data. The longitudinal effects of synthetic peptide therapy on human health simply remain unstudied in proper large-scale clinical trials.
We just don't know what happens 10 years down the line. Right. There are also documented risks of severe immune system reactions and potential hormonal imbalances, as injecting synthetic analogs might cause your natural hormone production to downregulate in response.
Which perfectly explains its extremely murky legal status, because despite the miracles we've discussed, this is not an FDA-approved drug for human use.
No, it is not.
The breakdown explicitly states it is strictly classified under the loophole of a research chemical. It is legally prohibited from being sold or marketed as a dietary supplement or a medical treatment.
And if you are a competitive athlete, the World Anti-Doping Agency, WD, strictly bans it under the S2 category for peptide hormones and growth factors.
So no professional sports.
None. If TB-500 shows up in your blood or urine during a drug test, you face immediate severe suspension from your sport.
So let's bring this entire journey together for you, the listener. We've traced TB-500 from its microscopic origins. We saw how scientists took natural thymosin beta-4, stripped away the bulk, and isolated the active healing domain to create a highly durable synthesized fragment. A really incredible feat of engineering.
It is. We explored how it acts as the ultimate cellular construction foreman, binding to actin to build roads for progenitor cells, clearing out the old matrix, and laying down new blood vessels to heal everything from a torn ligament to damaged heart tissue.
We also laid out the intense reality of the administration protocols, the necessity of reconstituting powders, the frequent subcutaneous injections to maintain systemic levels, the careful loading and maintenance cycles, and the popular practice of stacking it with other peptides like BPC-157 to maximize total tissue recovery.
And finally, we confronted the sobering reality of the risks. The threat of unregulated angiogenesis feeding abnormal tissue growth, the strict WIDA bans, and its rigid legal classification purely as a research chemical.
It's a lot to weigh.
It is. You now have the full blueprint of this controversial peptide based on our sources. You understand the mechanisms that explain why the biohacking and athletic worlds are absolutely obsessed with its recovery potential, but also why the medical establishment and regulatory bodies are keeping it strictly locked in the research-only category.
Because it represents the absolute bleeding edge of regenerative science, carrying both the incredible promise of eliminating the waiting game of injury and the perilous long-term biological risks that come with forcing the body's hand.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, building on a fascinating detail from today's breakdown. The text noted that our natural, native thymosin beta-4 is rapidly metabolized and cleared by the body.
Very rapidly, yeah.
Evolution explicitly designed it to be temporary. It triggers the alarm, does its brief job, and disappears. That rapid clearing is exactly why scientists engineered TB-500 in the first place, to artificially hack that natural protein so it stays in your system longer and works harder.
That was the whole goal.
So it makes you wonder if human engineering is already successfully overriding our natural healing limits to create these hyper-durable fragments in a lab. Is it only a matter of time before these exact compounds are refined, perfected, and become standard daily prescription tools at your local doctor's office? Or will that terrifying biological irony we discussed, the risk of runaway tissue growth, prove that evolution actually had it right all along by clearing these proteins out quickly, keeping these synthetic shortcuts forever locked in the biohacking underground? The next time you find yourself stuck on the couch waiting for a muscle to heal, ask yourself, would you be willing to hire that cellular construction foreman if you couldn't be entirely sure when he'd finally stop building?